Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? That's what I like to hear. Distinguished guests, thank you very much, Mr. Menard, for your words. Mr. Menard is also the Chancellor of Concordia University, and so it's a thrill to have him with us today. So we're here to talk about student engagement, youth engagement, and that's precisely why Youth Fusion was born over 3 years ago, to mobilize universities, to mobilize youth to counter dropout rates. Dropping out of school is a bit of a tragedy. Every student who doesn't complete secondary school lacks the fundamental skills needed to thrive in our fast-paced, information-rich society. And yet, despite the fact that we live in one of the richest countries in the world, some high schools in First Nations and in big cities have dropout rates that go as high as 85%. 9 jeunes sur 10 dans certaines nations autochtones quittent les bancs de leur école avant l'âge de 20 ans. And it's a vicious cycle, meaning that the communities that need leadership the most sometimes lack the leaders or sometimes don't have the necessary leaders to move that community forward. And overall in Quebec, as mentioned in the video, 31% of youth do not have a high school diploma by age 20. What are we doing wrong? Does someone have an answer? Why are we failing to educate our kids in compelling ways? Why are we failing to get them to stay in school? Is there an answer? Well, perhaps because we're not intellectually engaging our kids in learning. When I heard about the dropout issue and about this diploma gap, I set out to visit many of these high schools across Quebec. And as I spoke to thousands of kids about youth engagement and about my work, I asked them one question. What would keep you motivated to stay in school? And the kids would line up behind microphones, and they would give me really simple answers that I don't understand why nobody ever listened to those answers, but they gave me clear answers. They said, make us part of projects that compel us, that engage us. Give us the tools, the people, the resources needed to make those projects happen. And so whether they cared about the environment or creative arts or technology, these kids wanted to be engaged. And the funny part, or not so funny part, is that teachers and principals would come up to me at the end of the presentations and say, you're right, we don't ask our kids often enough what it is that they want. And that's the issue, and that's the core of the dropout issue. We don't ask our kids often enough what it is that they want. And so, armed with this feedback from the kids, I came back to Montreal and I contacted Kathy Asayag and Evelyn Abitbol, who I think are in the audience, at Concordia University. And I had the seed of an idea that you heard about, and the idea was new. The idea had never been implemented in Canada. It was simple, and it was an idea that went beyond mentorship. Hire university students in all fields, or recent graduates in all fields, and send them into high schools to work with at-risk students in the disadvantaged high schools 15 hours a week from September until June. So it was a full-year commitment. And Concordia said yes. And so we matched graduates' backgrounds with real-world projects that you heard about. And here's the list of them. You know, environmental projects, green teams were started by environmental science students. Journalism students launched youth-led newspapers and radio shows. Exercise science students launched sports activities. MBA students launched entrepreneurship and small businesses in high schools. Music students taught music and organized concerts that were pretty big, actually. Engineering students built robots and organized science fairs. And the idea caught on. And the children in these schools were having access to these new compelling activities, and at the same time, university students were gaining these real-life, hands-on, relevant experiences in their own fields of expertise. And so we decided to move forward with the idea and to really launch it across Quebec. And it works because we're proving the correlation between the motivation to stay in school and student engagement. It's working because teachers are collaborating with us to engage their kids in new ways during class time. It's working because 8 universities have decided to come on board ever since Concordia came on board. We have Université de Montréal, we have ETS, we have HEC, Polytechnique, l'UQAM, McGill, and Université Laval. It works because businesses and foundations are believing in us. We have TD Bank that's supporting environmental initiatives. We have the Opera of Montreal and the Greater Montreal Foundation helping us start music departments in schools where there were 0 instruments. We have the City of Montreal and Aldo Group helping us start more entrepreneurial programs. We have the J.W. McConnell Foundation, we have Ashoka Canada, we have the Jean Sauvé Foundation that have helped us expand the program, not only across Quebec, but now we're looking to launch it across Canada. And it's working because our driving force has been a visionary, Mr. Jacques Ménard, who is the president of BMO Financial Group, and who is the man behind the reason why Quebec society is really rallying behind this dropout rate issue. And it keeps growing. In 2 years, we went from 2 schools to 20 schools, from 150 kids being involved to over 3,000 kids being involved across the province, from 7 university students hired to 65 university students hired to work in our program. And now we're even in the Cree Nation, in the Cree Nations up north in the James Bay area, thanks to Réunir Réussir, who are here in the audience as well. And I'd like to share one of my favorite examples with you of how it actually works. But before, I want to tell you about the results so far. Absenteeism rates have gone down by 10, 15, sometimes 40%. Participation rates have also gone down in the high school, gone up, sorry, in the high schools where we are working by exponentially. The grades of the kids too are going up, and something else that's going on or going down are the dropout rates in the high schools where we are working. In the high schools where we have been the longest, we've seen a reduction of 10 to 15 to 18% reduction in the dropout rates. And as I mentioned before, I'd like to share one of my favorite examples of how it actually works. But first, I'd like to invite a very special guest of mine to come on stage. His name is Steve Rousseau, and he's a high school student from St. Henry. And so, bonjour Steve, ça va bien? Oui, ça va super, merci. Tu peux rester debout, je te fais pas encore travailler. A year ago, we decided, or we managed to launch a robotics program called First Robotics that you saw in the video. And through this program, kids get to build a robot in 6 weeks, and this robot needs to play a sport. And so Steve was one of the first kids to go to Toronto from Montreal to go and face opponents. And last year, they had to build a robot that had to play a sport, soccer. And we showed up to Toronto thinking we were really strong, which we were, but our robots barely moved, and just the fact that they moved was a huge accomplishment. And the robots, the opponents, had crazy mechanisms, multi-directional wheels and kicking mechanisms that could score 20 feet away. So it was pretty intimidating. But people like Steve said, no way, we're winning. And with his robot and his team, they went all the way to the semifinals. And so we were very proud of them because we were winning. And at the end of the presentation, or at the end of the competition, Steve came up to me, and Steve is a rough guy. I don't mind saying it because I'm his mentor, and he's really rough, right, Steve? Right? Good. And Steve came up to me and said, you know what, thank you for this. I think I want to become an engineer, and next year, you know what, let's come back and let's claim that victory that's ours. But I need to ask you one thing. And I said, anything you want, as long as you come back to school. And he said, get me some of those multi-directional wheels. And so we did this year. And Steve is going to show us this year's robot that they built in January. And his name is Kofi. So, Steve, can you please show us what you can do? This year was not soccer, it was a different type of game. Oh, hopefully it's not going to fall. Okay. Perfect. That's it. And I'm very proud of this kid because, like I mentioned, he's my mentee, I'm his mentor. And in the same way that I have mentors like Jacques Ménard, I am the mentor of this kid. I'm not as cool as Jacques Ménard, but I am, his mentor. And as I finish my presentation, I can't help but think of the teachers and the principals who said we don't ask our kids often enough what it is that they want. And that's why Youth Fusion, it's the kids who choose all the activities that we put on in the schools. It's the kids that interview the university students for the job, and they decide who gets the job. And, with the enthusiasm of our partners, with the support of our partners, partners who have helped us launch the robotics program like Vigilant Futures and Bombardier and CAE and Hydro-Québec, with mentors from Polytechnique and ETS. With their support, we're getting these kids thinking about what it is that they want to do rather than wondering what they could have been. And I think we're turning them into leaders, one student at a time. And in doing so, I really truly believe that we're transforming communities and enriching our great nation. So, Steve, je suis très fier de toi. His grades are going up. He just told me that he passed for the first time in a long time his French exams. So we're very proud of him. Donc, merci beaucoup, Steve. And so if you want to get involved, you can reach us at youthfusionquebec.org. If you want to donate or get involved, please contact us. And don't forget to vote on May 2nd, please. We need you to change Canada. Merci, Steve. Bon, tu dis au revoir?